This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day, carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fully Managed Podcast. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So for everyone that is in the audience right now, Kevin has a lot of design experience. So I thought I'd throw you a game that would be very fun. I hope that you'll enjoy it. It might be something that you never really thought about before. It might be something that you think about all the time. I'm not a designer, so I don't have the designer brain, but this might be fun. So,
Okay.
Are you ready?
I guess so.
So this game is called Old or Gold. So I'm going to give you a list of brands that have had their logo for a pretty long time.
Okay.
And maybe it's varied slightly. I'm not positive of the history of every single one of these, but I want you to tell me whether you think that it should stay the way it is or if you would change it and how you would change it. Obviously, you can't show me, which is probably a big part of it, but you can describe it to me, whatever it may be. Does that sound good?
Hey, let's do it. I have not been in the branding game for many decades, but yeah, this is something that would be fun to do.
Yeah, it's like a fun little, it's you don't have to be a perfect brand master in order to answer these questions. It's just a fun little exercise. Maybe your creative juices will be flowing and you'll be, on your game today.
Okay.
All right. So the first one is Verizon.
Yes. I mean, the Verizon logo, if we're talking about the logo mainly being the center face of the brand, is very recognizable. I mean, the big check mark, the V. I don't know if they've gone through a rebrand in the last 5 or so years, but to me, that brand has always been pretty modern. It's brightly colored. It kind of feels like it's from the 2020s. So I would say that one's pretty golden for me. Of course, as a designer, I can always find improvements in anything. I often joke that the trash can has existed for a million years, and yet we can still design new trash cans every year. So yeah, we could design a new Verizon logo, but I consider that one gold.
I would agree. I think it's pretty notable. I think all of these are pretty notable though, just because they're notable brands. So it really depends on your perspective. So the next one is Yahoo.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if that one's really, I think it's maybe changed once as far as I'm aware. It's not very.
Yeah, I'm going to be in trouble for this one. I actually used Yahoo as an example of a poor user experience and poor brand experience in a social media post I did recently. So I'm going to have to call that one in need of work. Yeah.
What would you do to it personally?
Well, okay. I'm a big believer in sort of Hick's law that we try to keep things as simple as possible. And so, one of the reasons that the Travelers logo or the FedEx logo, or you just said the Verizon logo, the reason those work is because they keep it very simple. And they basically don't try to say too much with their logo. They really try to get at the essence of one core belief about their brand. Cause that's all people can take, that it just goes in with the law of cognition that we just don't want to be overloaded with information. We get confused very easily. So I would simplify that logo quite a bit, and really just focus on what is the thing that differentiates Yahoo.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that I even have trouble picking up what the logo is in my brain, like picturing it right now. I know that it's purple and it has like an exclamation mark. I'm thinking of just the Y. I know that they have, but I have an email with Yahoo that I use regularly and I don't even think of the logo. So I think that that's probably not great.
Yeah, that one feels like maybe one of those jobs where they gave it to their nephew or cousin to do their logo back in 1995, and they just didn't veer too far from it.
Yep, for sure. I think that everyone has problems with Yahoo or like some kind of critique for them, whether it's design wise or the fact that, they could have stayed much more ahead of the game with email, where it's I have many conversations about Yahoo, so you're not the first to critique it, so don't feel like you're attacking them or anything like that.
Right.
So the next one would be Gap. This one I know about that they recently, in the last year or so, did alter their logo and people got very upset and they put it back. And I think that's really interesting.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. They put it back?
Yeah, which I thought was very interesting because normally that's not really like, I know sometimes they'll have an April Fool's joke or they'll change their logo and tell people that that's what it is. But this was one of, I mean, I'm sure this does happen, but something that I haven't really heard about. I was talking about it with someone the other day.
Yeah, that may have been, I mean, I don't know the background here at all, but that may have been a strategic marketing decision because nobody
Relevant.
does that. I could see that driving interest and talk about the brand. But yeah, in general, I'm aware of the Gap logo. It's very familiar to us, and it's very simple. So it follows all of my checklist items. I would call that one golden.
Is there any time where you would think that simplicity for a logo is not the best thing, or is that something that you're like it's your rule of thumb?
I mean, it is my rule of thumb, but I would say that if there's a core message about your brand that is counter to simplicity, so I'm trying to think of like there's a surfing brand or sort of a clothing brand called Salt Life, for
Hmm.
instance,
Hmm.
where it's like the opposite. It's about sort of a grungy ocean going lifestyle and surfing. That would be an example where probably simplicity doesn't make sense. You want some visual interest in your brand, and certainly in your products.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I think that it's in the interest of what your brand stands for to have that logo. So not necessarily like simplicity for a brand that is similar to many other brands. I think that's you want to be identifiable, like you want to stand out, but you also want to be simple so that people aren't overwhelmed with your logo.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the pendulum swings, and there's definitely trends in branding. But really since I don't know, probably late '60s, we've just found strength in simplicity, and I don't see that being a big pendulum swing that's going to go back to the sort of chaos and hand drawn logo types of the early 1960s. I think that simplicity really is here to stay.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting switch up, I guess, to some things that they created like way back when. I recently discovered that the Walmart logo used to be like old-timey Western when it came out, and I love that. I wish that they kept that. I think that it's kind of way cooler than just the blue and the yellow right now. But that is, I guess, a little more complicated. Like the new one is very simplistic, and I know the little I don't know what to call them, like the little uh, above is very identifiable. So people are thinking about that. And I'm thinking about that right now. So I guess it does work for the purpose of what it is.
I would say though, it would not work for everybody to go back to the high character and the crests. Gosh, all the crests, the hand drawn, script logos and things like that from the '60s. It wouldn't work. But yeah, I mean, you make a good point. You do want to differentiate, and for a brand here and there to do it, it can work.
No, well, okay, that leads me to another question. So could you maybe share about a project where there was like a unique approach that gave you like unexpected outcomes? It might not be good, it might not be bad, but whichever something that like stands out to you when you think about that.
Sure. Well, just a little background. We started our business in 2009. During this phenomenon where we noticed that just this exponential growth in data, and not an exponential growth of visualizing that data or making good use of that data. So we quickly discovered that we wanted to help companies monetize all of this growing data, and they don't know what to do with it. So we've approached almost every project for the last 15 years as we want to take this value that is the company data. Sometimes it's research data, sometimes it's survey data. Um, I'll give you a specific example. We worked with a marketing company that sells online sort of cache and cookie data from users. And this particular company monetizes that data by helping advertisers target their market.
Mhm.
So they could say specifically, if you want to market something on left-leaning political spectrum, then you're 50% more likely to reach that audience by advertising on the Daily Show, let's say.
Mm.
And so that is complicated data, and no human being can totally understand all of the inferences and insights you could get from that chaos. So the way we approached it is to basically build their data up from the ground visually, so that everybody at the company was actually educated on what the heck the data from the company even looks like. And then from there, we were able to productize a bunch of different products that helps their customers target the right advertising.
Okay. Yeah, that is it must be something it's really interesting because now I think that there's so many companies that do something like that. So it's not necessarily new, but back in 2009, that was something that was overtly complicated that people weren't even thinking about maybe. And I think that it is really cool to be able to get into learning about something that seems so complicated at the time, but it's definitely a learning experience because especially having such data driven approaches, that is something that's incredibly new, but something that has become so normalized. So you have that experience.
It really takes a team to do it too. That's like the blocker, because most of us, we have our creative moments or we have our analytical moments.
Hmm.
Certain people are great at math, and usually those people are not great at design. So our niche has always been that join of left and right brain, the mathematical versus the design, because you really have to have both to put together that level of insight if your data is complicated.
Yeah. Speaking of, how do you balance like the art of storytelling as many people have incorporated into their marketing approaches and everything? Storytelling is big in this business, and the science of data visualization, to engage very diverse audiences.
Yeah, this is right in my wheelhouse. You're absolutely right. Stories are just the best way to reach humans. We are compelled by anecdotes and anything that touches our lives, a story that someone tells, and it works in sales, it works in entertainment, it works really everywhere. So these days, the trend is to be entertaining in your marketing and advertising, and yeah, storytelling is a big part of that. With us, yeah, the data. I mean, I'll tell you, going back to that example I just laid out, when we sat down with the leads of the company and we showed them the story of their data, showing them how they got to this point and how there are 70 different categories of data and 100, I think it was like 160 or 170 subcategories of data, families of data. It was really like the biological family tree of data. And we laid it out in a sunburst diagram for them so they could really actually visually see how the sort of nodes branched off from each other, and they could quantify what all of these families and subfamilies of data were. Um,
That's crazy.
but yeah, and
That's so much.
and like every company, there's a story to how they got there. Like how is it that their foundation of segmenting users and their marketing data got to that point? And so we really walked through that whole sort of lineage of how we got here, and we helped them fix it. So we got it down to about 40 categories that made sense. We worked on the taxonomy for them, and that just resulted in easier sales for them and easier to build products.
That's really cool. So it was you use the data to tell a story, basically, instead of kind of like incorporating it afterwards or using it to kind of because I think that when I speak to a lot of people in marketing positions. So storytelling is kind of very different for them in the idea that when they tell a story, it's more what's the word I'm looking for? Like sentimental, I suppose. Whereas using data to tell a story is something that's very different. But it's very interesting because it's a different way of telling a story, but it's more appealing to a certain group of people, I would say, because it's something that's evidential rather than something that you have to believe in and trust, which is a difficult thing for marketers to, implement in their strategies.
You said it, evidential. Yeah, I like to think of it as we're unearthing the story rather than scripting something and trying to find data to fit that story.
Yeah. No, I support that because I think that that's something that is something that is not necessarily building trust in the marketing world because there's so much noise that we do see of like advertising and everything like that. And I think that having this trying to pull at your heartstrings kind of approach is helpful in a lot of industries, but also something that everyone it feels like is trying to do and be very personal about things. But nothing really you can't really debate facts. You can't really debate data. Obviously, people can skew data with just something else entirely. But um, to be able to create a story from data, I think can be much more convincing for a person that wants that rather than something that may hit the right person if you get them on a good day where they're feeling sentimental about whatever this subject may be. But this is something that is, I feel, much more foolproof for a larger audience than something that would be more emotional.
So thinking about your audience that you just mentioned, I mean, any any data can support what humans are after,
Mm.
right? Like, I'm not an expert at marketing, and I wouldn't call myself an expert of sociology or human development, but I know two things, which is that humans all want to be more happy and avoid pain. So if you can find the data, unearth the data, if you will, and discover how your audience could become more happy and avoid pain in their lives using that evidence based approach, then right there you have a story for marketing.
No, I definitely agree. It is something that if the data supports something like someone being happy and healthy or just like being less frustrated with something, I think that that is it's still somewhat of an emotional approach in the way that, that would convince me if I was frustrated with something and this was a solution to my problems. But it's I think that there's many people that don't use data to support those findings. And I think that that is probably at a detriment. I think that there's cases in which it could work without providing data because maybe people don't want that as much sometimes. I don't really the average person may not want a bunch of data because they might not understand it, but I think that there's a way of implementing it that could work for like the average person.
Yeah, I mean, we said earlier that anecdotes are just more powerful than evidence usually. Um,
Sure.
but then you're going to have a portion of your audience dig in, So if you make a claim that's an emotional claim, and how this product is going to make you happier or avoid pain in the future, a certain percentage of people will just relate to that, and it will work. But there's a great deal of people who it's not the right time for them to receive that message, or they want to learn more, or they don't have the trust instilled yet. So they will actually do further research. And for that group, you have to have a more nuanced story behind it that is evidence based for those people. And I'll tell you, even if that group, the ones who are declared that they need evidence, if that group is not convinced by the evidence, then the first group will find out. So yeah, even if you don't think your audience is heavy into data, you want to have that data to back it up, because it will be discovered.
Yeah, yes, there are definitely groups that will broadcast that because they're very angry with the lack of correct data. I think that I would actually argue that maybe in like the changing landscape of social media implementation in like influencers being heavily involved in marketing and any kind of advertising. I think that maybe antidotes might be moving out only because there's so much noise that I think that someone's story doesn't always resonate anymore. And I think that I would go along with the data approach of that. I don't know, like I will get an advertisement for like 20 different things that do the same exact thing. And because of my algorithm and whatever it may be, now they all got me, right? And all of them will have a story of someone that this changed their life, right? But I don't trust that person. I don't know that person. And those anecdotes don't necessarily get me, but what does get me is going on their website and seeing, what studies did they do to get this proven, like that this actually works and does whatever it says it does for me. Um, what, how many people did this actually help, or is this just this person? Like, is there a researcher that's in charge of this that, like that I trust and has like an actual doctorate and isn't just this random person, that felt like making something. And there are so many things that are involved in a story that need to be showcased. And I think that with all the noise in social media nowadays, I think that data is more important than anything. Data is more important in an approach to advertising, in design, in anything, just to be able to prove to an audience that that does actually work and does actually do exactly what people are asking and looking for. And anecdotes, I think, will be maybe less. I could be wrong. I'm not a perfect marketer either, but and it just might be less valuable in the future because trust is going to be harder to gain.
Well, I certainly agree with that last bit. You're more optimistic than I am at the first part, because I've been endlessly frustrated by the reduction in evidence. I think, at least what I've been exposed to, which I would expect the opposite, because we're all subjects of this social media experiment
Yes.
where what works, like we have highly targeted advertising and marketing now. So what works for me should be what I see the most of. But I'm actually seeing a lot of the opposite. I'm seeing a lot of just, advertising that discourages me from even looking at social media.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just my experience, and I'm a pessimist on it. But yeah, I think that the trend has been the opposite. And that's why I try to make a concerted effort to debunk things that I think are false.
Mhm.
Or if I see snake oil, being sold, I try to discourage people from it. But yeah, I think that's a bit of a losing battle lately. So I don't know. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but
No, you're not. I think I completely understand what you're getting at is the idea that I try to be very optimistic about the world of social media, but I do understand what you're saying in the idea that I don't know if I'm the average person because I have like I think that from experience, I have bought a product that doesn't work or do what it says it's going to. And that has discouraged me for everything else. And so once I do that, I realize, oh, I didn't look enough into this, or I probably could have figured this out before purchasing it, whatever it may be. And I think that there, with we're getting onto a different topic entirely, but with the increase in social media engagement and everyone using it, even my parents, that people are susceptible to so much more persuasion on anything, facts, things that they think are facts and are not, so much noise, and that goes into advertising and marketing and creativity, anything that you can see under the sun, and you are convinced of things that you might not be convinced of 20 years ago because you didn't have all this noise and people telling you things. And a lot of times you would want to find out more in order to prove something in your head, but because so many people are saying it and your feed is full of people saying that, then you're convinced that that's the truth. And that is a problem. But I hope, and this is maybe a philosophical debate on humans and how they're evolving with social media, but I would hope that the more people that get, um, for lack of better phrasing, screwed over by a product or service, that maybe they'll have better critical thinking skills to not put themselves through that exact thing again. But I don't know if it's actually something that will happen, unfortunately.
I have young kids right now, and I've um, I've accepted that the best way for them to learn lessons is to experience pain sometimes, because you can tell them to do something, 100 times, but until they actually have the pain of doing it wrong,
Mm.
what you're describing is 100% true. I couldn't agree with that more. And I think I saw, uh, I'll have to credit you later with where I saw this, but um, in sort of cognitive study, I've heard that there's basically two levels of thinking, right? There's like this. I mean, we're simplifying it, but let's call it level one thinking is just you're being entertained, you're getting a flow of information like we do on social media, and you're scrolling through things. You're not thinking deeply about them. And so the more advertisers can hit you at that moment where you're doing very simple level one entertainment level thinking, it's easier to convince you of something that you shouldn't be convinced of. Whereas when we're learning, like if you're in a classroom setting with a professor or teacher who's giving you instruction and then you have to do the lesson, you have to actually do the work of do the math, let's say, and learn calculus, something hard. That requires a whole different level of thinking where your brain is not so easily tricked. You're having an inner dialogue with the first level thinking, and your second level thinking is saying, wait, is that really true? Let's test it. And let's perform a sort of scientific method on what you thought was true. That's the only way you can learn calculus is to go deep and wide and basically do the work. But yeah, we're getting less and less of that in our lives, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, I do think that's a big problem. I think that it's also, um, with this is a great this is a great topic. So with the integration of AI in many parts of our lives as well, I think that that even lessens that second step even more because I went to college and did not have these things, these helpful tools, to write an essay for me.
Right.
But and I had to do research in order to do that. And I'm not saying that kids now in college aren't doing research. I don't really know what they're doing anymore, and that's not my business at this moment in time. I'm sure in 20 years when I have kids in college or something like that, I will be very scared. But right now I'm going to put that out of my mind. Um, however, I do think that AI is another integration of another step forward or maybe step backwards of critical thinking skills. Are we putting ourselves in that spot where we are actually not just thinking with that first part of our brain, but rather thinking deeply and critically on something and being able to determine truth from false, true from false. But unfortunately. I don't know. But that leads me to maybe a more optimistic question. How do you integrate AI into design processes? Because I know that everyone does that now. Unfortunately, it may be something that we're all not happy about, but I do think it has ways of enhancing and challenging creative workflows that are extremely helpful. So I'd love to know how that is something that you use.
Yeah, you just explained part of my thinking on this. When you went to college, you had to write essays, so you know how to write an essay, and that's a good skill to have while you're critiquing what AI can do for you now. So if you have to write an essay now, you could use AI, but because you've gone through that hard work of
Mm.
second level thinking development on that, you are better poised to critique that work and be a better, um, you can get better outcomes from AI than someone who hasn't gone through that experience. So I do look at AI as a tool to improve our efficiencies, and going back to human, just who we are. We want to make things easier because we're looking for happiness in our lives too. We want to be quicker, more efficient, and do better work. So yeah, specifically speaking, we use AI every single day. My team is using it to we use it to help us write contracts. We use it to help us create roadmaps for products. We use it to summarize meeting notes. We even use it to help brainstorm design for products. There are several tools on the market. I'm sure you've heard of Canva. People have used Figma. There's some embedded tools in Figma now, and FigJam, and and others. There are plugins as well for Figma that we've used, which allow us to basically get a rough UI UX output.
Mhm.
And then our developers and designers can work together to make that real. I wouldn't, obviously, I mean, we're talking now in the middle of 2025. So whatever we say is going to be antiquated in a year. But at this stage right now, it's obviously AI is not a designer and it's not a developer, but it is a great tool for brainstorming or drafting something simple to build upon.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think that it's not something that is doing a job for you at any point. At least maybe in the near future that might not be true. But right now it's definitely something that you have to look out for. Making mistakes if you do want it to do something in entirety. Or something that is really great for like a first step of a process or like a draft or to get your creative juices flowing to have like some kind of inspiration. I think that that's something that it can be incredibly helpful for. It also has all these nice little tools that can help you do very tedious activities very quickly. And that I think is something that is incredibly beneficial because that is something that is not what we want to do and isn't fulfilling for people. And also is something that may take up too much unnecessary time. So that's something that I think is incredible about it. Of course, there are downsides always, but I do think that as of now, having a helpful tool is nice. It's just like having a computer when they didn't have computers. I'm sure that's a little helpful tool that people didn't really like the idea of, and now we have AI. So that's fun.
Yeah, I mean, those of us who've been in the business a while, we all have a lot of books. I have a lot of posters and design books, which you can't quite see behind me. And I draw on those for inspiration a lot. But more and more, I'm relying on large language models to actually be something I communicate with and do some brainstorming and provides inspiration.
Hmm.
Um, and I know, there's a lot of complexity behind the copyright and, where those ideas originated from. But I'm a believer that you basically look anywhere you can for inspiration. And that just is a strong one for me these days.
Have you ever read The Art of Stealing? I believe.
Yes, I read that back in design school.
Yep. I read that in school as well. But I always think about it when I think about AI like inspiration, I guess, because yes, there are issues with where these come from and whatever. But you also don't know what the ideas in your brain come from either, which is, it's more complicated than that with AI. But at the same time, I think about it like, I don't know if anyone has original thoughts. They're all pulling something from somewhere that, we're not necessarily, um, especially artistically, we're not necessarily, we're taking in information at such a fast pace that we don't necessarily know where our creative thoughts are coming from. And they could come from inspiration from something we saw 2 weeks ago and we don't remember that. And that's okay. It's just about doing it tastefully and in a unique way that is not blatantly copying something.
I completely agree. I think we would have a lot of deep philosophical agreements on that. And and it is those seasoned designers and entrepreneurs really own up to that. Just accept that the next idea in your head isn't something that you came up with, because you would have to have thought the thought before you thought it. That it's all just, it's flowing into consciousness, and it's driven by your life experiences and your inspiration in every moment.
Well,
And owning that is like also accepting that the next idea in your head, don't feel too connected to it, because
yeah.
it just came into consciousness. And so you can allow yourself to let yourself and others critique that idea and not feel personally offended if someone doesn't like an idea.
Yeah, that's even better of being able to take criticism better, because I think that's something that I think people have difficulty taking criticism because they feel personally attacked by the idea that I created this and this is mine and you don't like it. But at the same time, it's like, is it yours? Like I don't know if like, not to say that original thought isn't possible, but I don't really know necessarily. I mean, we're having a lot of philosophical conversations today, which is cool. But yeah, I don't necessarily know if there are original thoughts anymore. I think that we build on thoughts that we take from information that we've taken in. And I think that that's not a bad thing. I think that improving and being innovative is a good thing. And that's always what's going to happen. Even like with crazy technological advancements, like everyone's thought about that. Maybe they didn't think it was possible, but they've thought about it. Or they thought about different things of, AI was thought to be impossible at some point, but people still thought about what if there was a robot that could do things for us. And that's the big, everyone thought about the possibility of that. Like we had the Jetsons, but no one really thought that that was something that would really happen. And so I think it's like implementing an idea as well is something that is going one step further than just thinking about it.
Yeah, I've heard it said that some of the most successful business ideas, and also most successful art movements, are just not new ideas, but two things put together that weren't previously put together. And so there's a strategy in business and art, and design around that as well. Take two things that have never lived together before, or combining them in new and interesting ways. But yeah, except that it's really not original.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay that it's not original. It might, it feels sometimes original to put a new flair on something. And that is the cool part about art and creativity and fusion restaurants. So I think that, creating something out of things that have already been created to make it feel like it's new is artistic. And I think that's what it comes down to.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, we are out of time. We're actually a little over time, but I think that this is really fun. I appreciate you talking to me about many philosophical things rather than maybe more technical things, which if you wanted to get into that, I apologize. But I thought this was a very fun conversation to have.
Cool. It was great to meet you, Shannon. I love what you guys are doing at Penji, and I hope your audience will check us out at Loose Labs.
Thank you. And everything for that will be in the description so you guys can watch. So thank you so much. And check out Boost Labs and everything that Kevin is doing. Thank you and have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you, Kevin, again for joining me.
Thanks. Bye.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest. And to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.